Welcome to Leadership Kung Fu with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
Welcome to the Leadership Kung Fu podcast. This is our first podcast in 2025 and our first rebranded podcast that we're shifting from organizational transformation Kung Fu to leadership Kung Fu. I'm Sandi Verrecchia of Satori Consulting in Toronto, and I'm here with my friend Jen Long from Own Up in Colorado. Happy New Year, Jen.
Happy New Year, Sandi. Nice to see you in the frigid cold of January in Canada and Colorado.
It is ridiculous. I think I was saying before, minus 17 here on the Celsius scale. But yeah, crazy. Yeah. But we're hunkered down to do a fun podcast today for sure.
Yes, we are in the warmth of the pod studio.
Yes. So to our listeners, you'll notice that we kept the Kung Fu metaphor because we really believe that leadership is a skill that takes the time and the practice and the patience to learn, and just like the art of Kung Fu. So there are elements that each of us are really good at and others that we need to keep practicing and learning and applying back our learning to our practice. And it's a journey, right? It's not really a destination because we are all sort of learning as we go. So Jen and I are both coaches, and we work with many leaders to help them on their leadership Kung Fu journey. And at this point in our podcast, it's our way of sharing our thoughts and our learning with our listeners about what we've learned during our journeys. So today, we really want to talk about leading with clarity and maybe talk about some of the leadership myths that are out there that maybe are just myths and really aren't true. So Jen, does that sound good with you?
That sounds great, because it seems to be this is the kind of stuff that really kind of gets in the way and boogers up your productivity and your performance. And so if you're going to really do differently in 2025 and you're all looking down like, oh, it's a new year and we're going to change this. I'm going to be different. I'm going to be better. Then you should take a minute and really think about, right, some of the things that, what are you holding? What do you think is true that might not be true about how you lead, about what's going on in your organization, right? To really sort of kick the rocks over on some of the sacred cows or some of the things we don't question and some of the things that we just have bought into that might not be true anymore. And it's a great way to readjust your perspective, right? What are your truths that are no longer true? And what are you holding to be important, right? What are you valuing that maybe isn't that important, or it's not the thing that really is important, and you haven't stopped long enough to zoom out and really kind of ask that question. So you're walking in with all of these biases and understandings that you haven't examined as you look at 2025 and how you're going to show up and impact.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So our last podcast was on sort of planning for 2025, right? So I think if you've sat down and you've done some plans and some desires for the year, I think it's a really good time to sit and reflect on what are those truisms, as we like to call them, and untruisms in your world, because I think it really sets the stage for being successful in 2025. One of the areas that sort of brings up for me is, and I was just listening to a podcast on this the other day, was when you're doing that, it really sort of empowers you to question, right? And when you're questioning, one of the myths I think that comes up for me is that really good leaders don't say no, or really don't push back, or don't question because they're supportive and they're there along for the journey. And I feel that is a myth that really needs to be debunked. Like, good leaders, they do kick the rocks over, as you say. They do push the envelope. They do question. And they prioritize by saying no to things, as well as so that they can have clarity on what they're going to say yes to, right?
Yes. No ride shotgun all the time, right?
Yeah.
And yes, we have a lot to do, but if we're going to focus and if we're going to prioritize, that means we have a longer list of stuff we're going to say no to. And I think that's a hard thing for leaders to do.
It is. And I think there's two things of that. So when we talk about strategy, it's really almost more about what you're not going to do than what you are going to do, right? So that commitment to what you are, it says you have to say, I'm not going to. But I think as leaders too, and developing our leaders, our junior leaders behind us, that are the ones that are coming up, is empowering them to also say no.
Yeah, right. We are in an age of burnout. We are in, I mean, you might have gotten 2 weeks off and you might feel a little bit better coming back to work at the beginning of the year, right? But now that you're back in it and you're a couple weeks into it, does it even feel like you had a break?
Yeah.
Right. So it's that the and organizations are struggling getting workforce, keeping workforce, right?
Mhm.
And when you are working your people at the level that you are and you're under resourced and you're trying to figure it out, right? That's prime growth for burnout. And when you start, believing that there's all these things that you can accomplish and you're not saying no, right? You leave your decision making to these people who are gonna end up saying no to the thing mostly out of capacity and not because of strategy,
Yeah.
not because it's the best business decision.
Yeah. So one of the things that you could do, and this is a really good time to do, is to regroup with your teams. So
Mhm.
you sort of regroup personally, sort of what you were talking about, Jen, but also regroup with your teams. Like how are we going to tackle 2025, right? With the finite
Right.
resources,
What
the
are we going to say
stuff.
no to for at least the
Yeah.
first quarter? What are we going to say no to for the entire year? I mean,
Mhm.
no doesn't live permanently. No lives strategically. And
Yeah.
if you're using no strategically, it's not a permanent state. Strategy is you pivot,
Yep.
you
It's
move
fluid
through
for
it.
sure.
And if
Yeah.
you're doing it right, it's just no for now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fear, right? Is that when you say no, it means no forever.
No.
And that's
No.
not true.
And I think there's also a myth around saying no as no being a level of defiance. And we sort of have to shift our perspective on what actually no actually means.
Mhm.
Unless you are truly being defiant, which most people aren't in sort of what we're talking about, um, it is not a level of defiance. It really is a level of clarity, as we're saying. So if I
Absolutely.
don't have capacity, I'm not being defiant saying no. I'm saying I need help. I can't do everything. And so we need to have those two-way conversations that set clear expectations around our objectives and things like that.
Well,
So
it leads to realistic expectations as opposed to
yeah.
unrealistic expectations, which are this thing that people just don't even acknowledge at times that they've got unrealistic. And when you hand things to your team and you hear people on your team say things like, well, if you're going to give me that, what are you taking off my plate?
Mhm.
And you experience that as resistance instead of understanding that as, look, what do you want me to focus on? What's the priority? And that
Mhm.
really should be the question. And so if you're a team player and that's come out of your mouth, maybe ask the question differently, because
Absolutely. You're going to get a different
what you're
response.
not doing is being clear about what your issue is. So, um, you know, when you listen to that kind of stuff, those are good indicators that you don't have the focus and you don't have the prioritization that someone's looking for. And
Mhm.
that's your job, right? To create that focus.
Yeah, yeah. So, summarize this myth, saying no is not about shutting doors or resisting change. It's really about leading with intention. And if you can thoughtfully and purposely reflect on your commitment and what matters most, it really is a demonstration of strength. And I think it's something that we should actually embrace a little bit more in our leading with purpose mantra and sort of within our organization. So I think no isn't defiance. No is a way of creating more clarity for everyone. So
Yeah.
I think
No is your friend. No
we
is your
need
good
it. We need
tool.
more of it, right? Pushback.
More more no in
Yeah, that's right.
2025, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, here's one that I love, right? Which is really this status quo bias thought around if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Mm.
And that is, let's just validate why we want to be complacent.
And we can't be complacent, right? We're seeing it all around us. Like you need to, you're talking about pivoting. Strategy isn't always about pivoting. You can't be complacent in anything that you're doing. It's
Right.
if it
Right.
ain't broke, don't fix it. Does not
It's
work with
it's no
organizations.
momentum, it's no change, it's no investment, it's
No innovation.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
what if it ain't broke, don't fix it really means.
yeah, yeah. And what does that really say to your team? Your team is, just get your work done and don't rock the boat.
Mhm.
We're just going to be under the radar and just do our stuff.
Right. Right. And these are the things that people will say in a meeting when someone puts proposal on the table. These are things that, right. And because we feel overwhelmed and because we feel no one said no to anything, right? That's the easiest. I mean, it's the equivalent of I just can't deal with that right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And so beware. Those are red flag statements, and they're not necessarily true. And that's a good rock to kick over.
I think so. That's a really good one. One of the ones that I think is sort of interesting, because we talk about this a lot, but leaders don't show vulnerability. So weakness or mistakes is a sign of a leader that's really not doing a good job, right?
Mm.
We are rocks and we do things always right, and we never share, and we're never vulnerable.
Right, right. And this lives right next door. So I'm going to give you one that's very adjacent because I think they're connected, right? Is that I have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
Right. And those two like to hang out together. I don't want to be vulnerable and I have to have all the answers because I'm the leader and I should know. And when they ask me questions, when my team is like, what? I feel the pressure of having to come in and do that. And I don't want to perceived as, and, it's human. I don't want to be perceived as incompetent. I don't want to be perceived as ignorant. I don't want to be perceived like those are natural human responses, but don't let that hold you back from a really good discussion with your team, because this is the root of clarity, right?
Yeah.
If you think you have to know, and if you're afraid to say I don't know, or actually I would like your help in thinking this through, you pay people to think, you pay people to participate, and frankly, these kinds of discussions are what create meaning for people.
Yeah.
When their ideas get heard and their thinking is examined and they get to contribute to the conversation, that's that amount of vulnerability to say I don't know and I don't have all the answers, and gosh, I really would like to spitball with you guys, or I'd like to understand your perspective on something, can only add value, can only help you create better decision making, because more brains are always better than one. And that whole having to know all the things, right? And I can't tell you, when I have these coaching sessions with people who are just pressured and they're like, I got to figure this out. And I'm like, ask your team.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you don't have to have the answer. This is why you have people in your team, is that you come up together and say, let's look at all the things, because they can see the work from a different place than you. And they're going to bring a perspective that's going to add value. And the look of relief, like, oh God, I never even thought about doing that. Yes,
Yeah.
please. It's energizing instead of a net drain in energy.
Well, right, because that you're talking about somebody who's sort of sitting on an island trying to figure something out on their own, and that's a lonely place to be. And if you really think about really good leaders, they surround themselves with really good people that have really good answers, and so you spend all this time putting your team together, and they have the right skill sets and all the the right emotional intelligence, and then you sit on an island,
Right.
which makes no sense, right? And so if you're, really good leaders, look at your team, making sure that they have, the breadth and depth around you so that you don't have to have any answers. That is the point.
Well, and I think that we do a disservice, right? These leadership books about, this guy and that guy and the amazing thing that guy did. And like, he didn't do it by himself.
No.
Right? He didn't do it by himself. He couldn't have done it by himself. Yeah, he might have been a really good leader of collaboration, a good leader of inspiring, getting by, like all those things can be part of his person. But I can guarantee you the answers to the solutions, the good work that he did with a group of people.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the opportunity. Maybe we should write a book about that, Sandy, of let's talk about the whole team leadership thing and celebrate, 10 people who did
Right.
things, because what you really need to understand is that's where your magic sits.
Absolutely does. And so then the other myth, I think, so just talking about some things you were talking about, is that really good leaders got to where they got to because of their charisma. Right. So often people will look and go, oh, Sally, like she's just amazing, and her charisma is just out of. And is that what makes a strong leader? Is charisma? It's part of it sometimes, but not always. You could be a quiet leader and do an amazing job.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we just are attracted to that kind of energy. And because those people are engaging, right, and outgoing, they position themselves and they get buy-in and they connect to people. And so that's what we like. And
Yeah.
that's what we lean into. And that's all good. But they're not doing it on their own intellectually. They're not doing it on their own from a goal achievement standpoint. They're just not. And so, yeah, heroic leadership, no, not a thing anymore.
No,
It
no,
never really was. And I think we've made it into something and it's not real.
no. I would agree. You know, some of the best leaders that I know are sort of quiet. You know, accounting sort of type people. When you think about their personality styles,
Mm-hmm.
the steady, not the I's on the disc wheel, not the DI's on the disc wheel, not even the D's on the disc wheel, but the C's, the SC's that are just sort of they just get things done quietly
Mm-hmm.
and methodically, but they don't walk into a room and everybody go like wow because they've just claimed their presence, and so we
Mm-hmm.
have to be careful. It's a bit of a slippery slope about sort of saying that a leader needs to be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, leaders listening to this podcast or aspiring leaders, like, what is your style and how do you lean into it and make it your own to ensure that you are authentic to who
Yeah.
you are and not trying to be somebody else?
Yeah. Yeah. Golly, so many things, so many things.
Yeah.
Ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Here's a big one for me because I talk about this all the time. Results matter more than relationships.
Oh, totally. They do.
I get paid to deliver results.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody in your organization does. Everyone does. But you know what? If you don't have the relationships, and it's confounding because relationships really are the oil that makes the friction go away, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when your relationships are broken and you are working around people or you're avoiding people or you're dealing with what you think is someone who's difficult or politics, right? That bleeds into relationships. But when you don't stand in that, you have to spend way more energy and effort to get anything. Right? And US Congress is a big example of broken relationships, right? Complete dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
It's your network is critical.
Yeah.
And your network is not just people that you need to know for political reasons. Your network is the people in your organizations who you deal with on a daily basis. They are your stakeholders of the work you do. And when those are broken, and 9 times out of 10, it's not your processes and your systems necessarily. It's what's broken between people
Mm-hmm.
that are creating a lot of the issues because I'm not addressing things with you. I'm just like, those people in this department are problematic.
Those people.
Those people,
Those people.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good one because it yeah, results will come when your relationships are good and you can be collaborative and you sort of can lean into those around you. The results will
Mhm.
come, right?
Right,
And if they don't, then you shift. But
right.
you can't do it on your own, right?
In relationship, you don't have to like all the people.
Gosh,
And
no.
don't confuse relationship with like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Functioning relationship is just about respect. And you don't have to necessarily like people, but you need to respect what they do, where they are, what their perspective is, right? And work with those kinds of understandings. It's like we don't have to get together and have dinner. I don't need to know what's important in your personal life. I don't have to have all the things, but I do need to at least be willing to connect to you on tell me about what this means for you. Tell me about what your hesitancy is in working this way. Tell me about what, how do you like to be contacted?
Right. That's simple. Yeah, especially in the hybrid world, right? Where we're not just walking down the hall
Yeah,
and
what's
talking
the
to
best
people.
way for me to communicate with you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that really says that as a leader, we stand in the thought that everybody deserves to be in the role that they're in. Right. And not in judgment of those people aren't as savvy, or they don't have the answers, or they shouldn't be there. But if
Mm-hmm.
we sort of stand in this notion of everybody deserves to be in the seat that they're in,
Mm-hmm.
whether we have the right people in the right seats is another conversation for another day. But, from your standpoint as a leader, let's assume that everybody should be where they are. And then how do we build relationships with them? Because you're absolutely right. It's not about dinner parties on Friday night.
No, it's not even like I gotta enjoy your sense of humor.
No, gosh, no. No.
But I do have to give you space, and I do have to um be willing, right, to
Mhm.
learn about how you roll, so that as we work together, and what is our mutual goal together, and how do we focus on that when it gets difficult.
Yeah, yeah. There's been a few times in my career when I think back now that I sort of wish I knew that then, because there was relationships that, like, I really fought, right? Because they aren't people that I particularly liked.
Hmm.
And reflect now is gone through it and past it and all that sort of thing. I sort of wish that I had stood in that mental frameworks. I would have dealt with those relationships different, absolutely different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and in all kinds of work. We're not talking just corporate work. I mean, I think about people who are in the service business, and people who are managing servers and cooks, and people in the hotel and hospitality. I mean, there's always somebody who you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that guy, oh, that girl. It's like, what? Open your aperture a little bit. What can you start to understand about why they operate the way they do, and be a little bit more curious about who they are,
Yeah.
so that it's easy and it's effortless to judge and
Hmm.
criticize, and uh in that judgment, you lose your ability to be effective, right? When you are critical of other people in ways that are not helpful, when
Hmm.
they are part of your network of people, your stakeholder people, especially, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that will ultimately harm your results
Yeah.
fundamentally. Yeah.
So one of the tools that we have, if your organization does DISC, right, is
That-
the comparison reports that can be run, which is really good. I have one organization that uses them all the time. They just like, can you run one then for, yeah, absolutely. And it's a really good little glimpse into their personality and what motivates them, and what drives them, what stresses them, and how it relates to you. So if your company is a DISC company, those comparison
yeah,
reports
you
are
can use
fabulous
you can
tools.
use a platform to get into somebody's head.
That's right. That's right.
You don't have to actually talk to them in depth. You can go, oh, I see you're a C. I understand why you're so critical now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, if you're not if you're not if you're not willing to sort of have the conversation because for whatever reason it feels uncomfortable, or you just don't want to go there, having something to sort of fall back on, and something that is common language is a good
Yeah.
start.
You're not off the hook. Just
No.
because you don't want to, you're not off the hook.
Yeah.
Use a tool. Use a
Yeah.
tool. Get better, do better.
Yeah.
Because and uh I think pressure, organizational pressure, right? Schedule pressure, delivery pressure, whatever kind of pressure it is you're under, budget pressure, and you have to do the delivery thing. And those results are the only things you talk about, right? You are set up in every meeting of every day to talk about results, and don't misconstrue what's behind those results, what's missing, and what the people puzzle part is, because that's how you lose the plot, because
Yeah.
because how we talk about it is how we show up in it. And when we're always talking about results and we never really talk about, well, what's going on over there? Well, why are you guys not talking to each other? Right. And instant messaging is not a conversation, and texting is not a conversation.
No, no.
Right. You gotta have some cameras, you gotta have some phones, you
Whites
gotta
of the
have,
eyeballs.
yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta like actually get out of your office if you're on site and make an effort. And that is flat out what you have to do. And
Yeah.
and 9 times out of 10, coaching assignments in my world, have a conversation with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And so the myth that sort of, I think, also sits beside this one is I don't have enough time for that. Like, I don't have time. I am so busy that I don't have time to walk down and talk to Jen about the crappy job
Think
she's
about the
doing.
clock. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
the reality is, it's, time, we all have the same amount of time. How you choose to use your time
Mm-hmm.
is the important aspect of that. And if you choose to use your time to build relationships, it is not going to be time wasted. Right. But if you sit in your office trying to figure something out in a vacuum, that is time wasted, potentially, likely.
Yeah. If you're trying to do all the answers and make it up because you don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The I don't have time thing. And one of the best pieces of information I've gotten over the years as a coach is that it's not about time, it's about energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And where do you need to put your energy? Because when you're invested energetically, time's not an issue. But if you're going to understand how to manage your energy, right, you have
Yeah.
to understand what's important. So we're kind of circling back on the, the beginning of what are you saying no to so that you have the energy to do what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to really go, where do I, the question is not what do I need to get done today? What's pressing? How do I want to spend my time? It's where do I need to put my energy today? And where do my resources need to go such that I'm going to have the right impact? Because when you put it in time, it's a constraint and it's scarcity. But when you put it in energy, right, you tend to have more energy and are energized by things that are important.
Yeah. Yeah. I just reached over to my desk. There's an article on the corner right, from HBR, Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time. It's from 2014,
Mm,
but it's a great article. And I sort of use this as a basis of a management conference that I did in the fall. And it's not about the time. It is about your energy. And so it's a great article if you're looking for something to
yeah,
read.
100%. I mean, and all the people who do time management skills,
Mm-hmm.
it's all about energy, right? Because your decision making suffers more towards the end of the day because you have limited amount of your brain. Your brain is lazy. Your brain doesn't want to put a lot of effort in at the end of the day. And that's where your decision making gets sloppy. So when you've got tougher issues, those are the things you do at the beginning of the
For
day.
sure. Yep.
And besides, the tougher issues are obviously the things you need to handle, right? That's like the stuff you kick to the curb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or kick your email to the curb.
Yeah. I think, one of the ways, if you're not a relationship person in general, so you tend not to gravitate to that, is really scheduling time in your day to say, this is my relationship building time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't allow you to sort of slide over it. It's sort of in your face all the time. And so if you're not that way inclined, put it in your calendar and then
Yeah.
make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Structure. Give yourself
Mm-hmm.
structure around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Golly, that was a lot.
There's a lot. Yeah. So I think, the bottom line is there's a lot of things out there that sort of you get taught or you read in books that aren't really necessarily true. You've got to be, to be a true leader, you always sort of need to be reflecting on who
Mm,
you are and how you're showing up and how you're engaging and what are people sort of saying about you? What are you feeling when you're in a room? Are you getting the bristly of nobody wants to be here, or do people want to be with me, and things like that? So reflection is a key point of being a leader, and don't believe everything you read. Right?
that's true because there's a lot of content out there, right? The internet and just thought leadership, like all of these catchphrases that are out in the world has put a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things out in YouTube, and thank God TikTok is having a break. And there's just so much that what are you really listening? What are you hearing? Is it true for you? Is it true to is it true now? Right?
Yeah.
Um, and is it important? And are you looking at your past experience and thinking these are the things? And then you have to start to go, is my past experience on that relevant?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
There are deeper questions. And so when you do this self-reflection, it's not just, how do I show up? It's what got in the way of a better outcome,
Mhm.
right? What got in the way of what am I holding true about that? What are my assumptions on this? And part of this questioning thing is really, think more critically, not just reflectively, but
Mhm.
critically on some of the things that are challenging for you right now, because that may be the prime thing, the red flag for you of pay more attention to this. Why is this such a challenge, right? And really think that through and reflect on it.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully we had some myths that we've debunked. Hopefully people are going to listen to this. You're going to be a little bit more critically reflective on you, and I think really thinking about articulating who you are as a leader and how you want to show up, and knowing that things that have in the past, they shape us for sure. They inform us, but they are
Mm-hmm.
not us necessarily, right?
Right.
So I think that's a good
Right.
probably way to end the podcast. So
Yeah. I'll just end with all of the things we've given you. It's a practice, right? That's a lot of stuff. So kung fu on that.
yeah. So if you like the podcast, follow us. Uh,
Yeah.
Send us
Leave some
comments.
comments, share all
Share.
the things. And we'll be back with another fun-filled, educational, informative, insightful episode of Leadership Kung Fu in February.
Thanks so much.
All right. Talk soon, Sandi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandi's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI Consulting INC.ca. And you can check out Jen's website at accountabilityatwork.com. If you like what you hear, let us know by leaving a review on your favorite listening platform. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.